kidding. Holyfield looks a little stunned, a little weary. The comeback was over.
By the spring of 1991, George Foreman's comeback had a credibility problem. He was 42 years old, 4 years back into a career he had walked away from in 1977, and the run of victories he had compiled since then had come almost entirely against opponents nobody outside his own promotional orbit could name. On April 19th, at the Atlantic City Convention Center, he was finally scheduled against someone who could not be dismissed that way. Evander Holyfield, 28 years old and the undisputed heavyweight champion, holder of the WBA, WBC, and IBF titles.
And here's Holyfield coming back.
The promotion called it the Battle of the Ages, a phrase built to sell tickets, but it also happened to describe the actual question the fight was going to answer. Was Foreman a genuine threat, or a profitable nostalgia act who had simply not yet met anyone capable of ending it quickly? The skepticism was not unearned, but it also ignored what Foreman had actually done at his peak. He had won the title in 1973 by knocking out Joe Frazier, and he had lost it the following year to Muhammad Ali in Zaire in one of the sport's most studied fights. That history made him a strange kind of underdog, a man who had once been the most feared puncher of his generation, now treated as a curiosity because 18 years and a decade-long absence from the ring stood between that peak and this fight. The gap between those two versions of Foreman was exactly what Atlantic City was going to test. Foreman weighed in at over 250 pounds to Holyfield's roughly 208, and that weight was doing specific work. He was not there to outmove a champion 19 years his junior. His camp had built the entire fight around a single proposition: survive long enough, absorb what Holyfield landed, and wait for one opening to throw a punch heavy enough to end the night regardless of the scorecards.
And here's Holyfield coming back. Right uppercut, left hook. Right.
It was the same logic that had carried him to the title in 1973, stripped of anything resembling a plan B. Foreman did not need to win rounds. He needed to win one exchange.
But Holyfield comes back strong with his own left hook.
He used lateral movement to keep himself out of the pocket where Foreman's power did the most damage, working behind a jab and looking to accumulate rounds rather than force a finish against a man who, age notwithstanding, still carried a puncher's chance in either hand. For a champion at his athletic peak, fighting cautiously against a 42-year-old challenger might have looked like overcaution to outside observers.
Second time, or this different angle, right hand right on the beam.
It was, more accurately, respect for exactly the kind of threat Foreman represented. Not a fighter who could outbox him, but one capable of ending the fight with a single connection if given the room to throw it. The opening rounds established the pattern both camps had prepared for, but establishing a pattern and sustaining it for 12 rounds are different problems entirely. Foreman's corner needed him to conserve energy without conceding so much ground that Holyfield could simply pile up rounds uncontested. A balance that gets harder to strike the longer a fight goes and the more fatigue accumulates in a 42-year-old body carrying more than 250 pounds. Holyfield's corner needed him to keep landing enough to win rounds clearly while never forgetting, even for a single exchange, that the man across from him could still end the night with one connection. Neither game plan allowed for a moment of real relaxation, and neither corner got one across the full distance.
But Holyfield comes back strong with his own left hook.
Through the middle rounds, that respect looked justified. Foreman kept coming forward behind a stiff jab and used a cross-arm defense, reminiscent of the guard popularized decades earlier to absorb the volume Holyfield was landing without it visibly slowing him down.
But Holyfield comes back strong with his own left hook.
He was not winning the rounds on activity. He was making Holyfield spend energy just to keep him at a distance he preferred, and every clean shot Foreman landed in return carried enough weight that Holyfield had to treat each exchange with real caution, rather than simply outworking him at will. The fight's defining moment arrived in round 7. Foreman landed a heavy left hook that buckled Holyfield's knees and sent him briefly retreating toward the ropes, visibly hurt for the first time in the contest.
Holyfield comes back strong with his own left hook. Kind of a weak.
For a few seconds, the entire logic of Foreman's comeback looked validated in real time. The power that had ended Joe Frazier's title reign in 1973 was still there, still capable of threatening a champion in his athletic prime.
Foreman to keep punching and keep Frazier away from him with his punches.
Foreman pressed forward, looking to finish it. Holyfield, to his credit, did not panic. He clinched, moved, and bought himself enough time to clear his head. And by the time the round ended, he had weathered the single most dangerous moment of the fight. The Atlantic City crowd's response to that seventh round captured something the scorecards never could. For a few seconds, a building full of people watched the sport's biggest live betting favorite in years get genuinely staggered by a fighter most of them had paid to see, purely as spectacle rather than serious competition. The noise that followed was not simply excitement at a dramatic moment. It was recognition, spreading through the arena in real time, that the fight everyone had assumed was a foregone conclusion had briefly stopped being one, and that recognition changed how the crowd watched every remaining round that followed it. That round changed nothing about the outcome, but it changed everything about how the rest of the fight would be read. Holyfield reasserted control in the rounds that followed, using his conditioning and hand speed to pull away on the scorecards, and by the ninth round, he was landing combinations that would have stopped a great many heavyweights outright. Foreman absorbed them and kept coming forward. He was not competitive on the cards at that point. He was simply refusing to go down, round after round, against a champion who was landing cleanly and often. It is worth being precise about what the seventh round actually was and was not. Foreman hurt Holyfield badly enough to send him retreating, but he never put him on the canvas. There were no knockdowns in this fight at all, from either man, across all 12 rounds.
Or this different angle, right hand right on the beam.
That single fact carries more weight than it first appears to. A fighter who can be hurt that badly and still avoid touching down against an opponent already loading up to finish him is demonstrating a different kind of durability than simply absorbing punishment passively.
And they trade punches. Punch for punch. And
Holyfield's chin held, so did his composure. The round is remembered as Foreman's finest moment in the fight, and it deserves to be. But it is just as accurately remembered as the moment Holyfield's championship instincts were tested hardest and did not break.
With the jab, short right hand, right off the temple. Bingo again, right off the...
The judges awarded Holyfield a unanimous decision after 12 rounds, and the result was never seriously in doubt by the closing bell. What the scorecards could not fully capture was what Foreman had actually proven by finishing on his feet. That a 42-year-old heavyweight, conditioned and disciplined in a way his critics rarely credited him for, could take a prime champion's best punches for 36 minutes and never once look finished himself. He became the first man to take Holyfield the full 12-round distance without being knocked down.
Michael Buffer for the decision.
Let's have a round of applause for these two heavyweights.
A distinction that mattered more with each passing year of Holyfield's own championship reign, as the list of men who had shared a ring with him for all 36 minutes and stayed on their feet the entire time remained shorter than almost anyone expected going into that era of the division.
Looked like he ran into a little bit of a left hook. Oh!
For Holyfield, the win did quieter work on his own resume. He had moved up from cruiserweight to challenge for the undisputed heavyweight title less than a year earlier, taking it from Buster Douglas in October 1990, and questions about whether his frame could hold up against the division's biggest punchers had followed him since. Surviving Foreman's best shot without going down answered that question as directly as a decision on points ever could. He had not simply outboxed an aging opponent. He had absorbed the one punch in the fight capable of ending his night and kept his title anyway. And that specific proof of durability followed him into every subsequent fight against the division's other dangerous punchers. A reference point his own team could point back to whenever outside doubt about his chin resurfaced. Holyfield left Atlantic City with his 3 belts intact and his own reputation for durability reinforced by having weathered the hardest punch of his career to that point. Foreman left with something less tangible, but for the shape of his career, more useful.
George.
The viewers
Round 8.
The viewers at home.
Proof, delivered under the harshest possible conditions, that his power had not diminished with age, even if his legs and stamina inevitably had. That distinction mattered more than the loss on his record, because it was precisely the question his comeback had never been able to answer against lesser opposition. 3 years later, at 45, Foreman would knock out Michael Moorer to become the oldest heavyweight champion in history. A result this fight did not guarantee, but made considerably easier to believe in, both for the promoters willing to finance that eventual title shot and for a fighter who needed the belief before he ever needed the belt. The Atlantic City loss was the night the argument against him stopped being about whether the power was real, and became only a question of when he would find the opening to use it against a man who could not survive round 7 the way Holyfield just had. On a night that came closer to going the other way, for a few seconds in the 7th round, than any final scorecard from that evening was ever going to suggest to anyone reading the official result afterward. Long after the arena had emptied and the story had already hardened into a single tidy line in the record books that never quite captured how close the whole night actually came to reading very different.